everybody, I hope you're all well, and I hope you're all doing fine. I'm the one that does the lovely ground footage that you've been seeing, so I'm going to show you. We are at Lilleshall Abbey today, and I'm going to show you in a minute. I thought I'd show my face, so I hope you enjoy. So here we go.
Lilleshall Abbey was an Augustinian abbey in Shropshire, England, today located 6 miles north of Telford. It was founded between 1145 and 1148 and followed the austere customs and observance of the Abbey of Arouez in northern France. It suffered from chronic financial difficulties and narrowly escaped the dissolution of the lesser monasteries in 1536, before going into voluntary dissolution in 1538. Lilleshall was one of a small number of monasteries in England belonging to the rigorous Arouezian branch of the Augustinians. A persistent tale, possibly stemming from William Dugdale, the pioneering 17th century historian of Britain's monasteries, claims that there was an Anglo-Saxon church at Lilleshall, dedicated to Saint Alcmund. Even Dugdale sounded a note of skepticism, and by 1825, when Hugh Owen and John Brickdale Blakeway wrote their History of Shrewsbury, the skepticism was dominant and they would allow only they could not disprove the existence of the Anglo-Saxon foundation, much less the even less plausible tale that Alcmund was actually buried at Lilleshall. It seems that legends of early Lilleshall have developed by confusion with the Collegiate Church of St. Alcmund in Shrewsbury, which was dissolved to provide the funding for the abbey. More recent accounts, from Robert William Itons of 1856 to the Victoria County History of 1973, entirely skip the Anglo-Saxon period and set the origins of the monastery securely in the years 1145 to 8, during the reign of King Stephen. These accounts agree that Lilleshall was founded on the initiative of two brothers, Richard de Belmay, at that time Archdeacon of Middlesex and Dean of the College of St. Alcmund in Shrewsbury, and Philip de Belmay, Lord of Tong, Shropshire. Both were nephews of Richard de Beaumis, a bishop of London who had died in 1127, sons of his brother Walter. The younger Richard was later also to become Bishop of London. Arouez lay between Bapaume and Arras. Gosse, the 18th century historian of the community, portrays the region as bandit country in the early Middle Ages. He specifies the arrival in 1090 of Heldemar of Tournai and the German Conan or Kuno as the key event in the genesis of the Arouezians. Both were court chaplains of William the Conqueror, who embraced the Augustinian rule, and after William's death, set off across France to pursue a series of pilgrimages. Together with a local hermit called Roger or Ruggierius, they established a monastic cell and an oratory, dedicated to the Holy Trinity and Saint Nicholas. Around this grew a small community of ascetics who recognized Heldemar as their head or provost. Heldemar was murdered and Roger stabbed by a cleric, apparently attracted to the community, who was angered by their calls to penitence. After Heldemar's death on the 13th of January 1097, reports of miracles and the aura of martyrdom quickly led to recognition of his holiness, enhancing the status of the embryonic monastery. Only a few months later, Conan, his successor, successfully obtained confirmation of the monastery's foundation from Lambert, Bishop of Arras. Under their third leader, Richard, Arouez Abbey developed relationships with the nobility of northern France, establishing a cemetery in which to inter their benefactors. However, it was under Gervais, a former secretary to Eustace III, Count of Boulogne, elected its head in 1121, that the Arues community became an important reforming force within the Augustinian order. Although regarded as a house of Augustinian canons regular, Arues followed a stricter code of conduct than other Augustinians, modelled explicitly on that of the Cistercians from the time of Gervase. They soon became an international community, as houses were founded in other countries, modelled on the original monastery and termed Arusian. The first such monastery in England was Dorchester Abbey, Oxfordshire, founded around 1140 by Alexander of Lincoln, the local bishop, who suppressed a college of secular clergy to make way for the regular canons. The Belmay brothers had acquired land and influence in Shropshire and the surrounding counties mainly as heirs to their uncle, the Bishop of London, who had overseen the affairs of Wales and the Welsh marches on behalf of Henry I. Philip was his secular heir, and the king transferred many of his ecclesiastical holdings to Richard. The initiative of the Belmay brothers was far from inevitable. Earlier, Philip had been deeply interested in Buildwas Abbey, which was affiliated to the Congregation of Savigny, and later absorbed into the Cistercian order. He was admitted to the Savignac lay fraternity and made a gift of land at Ruckley, near Tong, in return for himself and his wife being commemorated in perpetuity in the prayers of Savignac communities. However, in the early 1140s he gave land at Lizard, Staffordshire, to found a church in honour of St. Mary for canons of the Order of Arues, who had come from the Church of St. Peter at Dorchester, and are serving God and St. Mary there. He gave the canons the right to collect wood for fuel and for building, and also donated 2 Leicestershire churches, at Blackfordby and Ashby-de-Larzouch. The small colony of canons from Dorchester struggled to establish themselves. Lizard proved unsuitable, so they moved first into Donnington Wood, near Rockwardine, and then to their final home at Lilleshall, a move that was complete by 1148. This was expedited by Richard Belmay, who seems to have been considerably younger than his brother and had been ordained as a deacon in order to take full possession his offices and estates only in 1128. These included the deanery of St. Almonds and 4 of its wealthy prebends, Lilleshall, Atcham, Uckington, and Preston Gubbles. At the Domesday survey these had been in the possession of a Norman priest called Godebold, after whom Preston Gubbles is named, apparently a crony of the regional magnate, Roger Montgomery. It is likely Godebold's son Robert continued this loyalty to the Montgomery dynasty and lost his inheritance by supporting the revolt of Robert of Bellême, as the estates passed to the elder Richard de Belmay and then to his nephew. The young Richard devised a radical scheme to dissolve the ancient college of secular canons and divert the wealth of its deanery and prebends to the new Arusian community of regular canons, a parallel to the foundation of Dorchester Abbey. The country was in the grip of the anarchy of King Stephen's reign, so great care was taken to ensure assent from a range of powerful interested parties. The changes at St. Alkmund's, a chapel royal, necessitated a charter from King Stephen, which he granted in 1145 at Bury St. Edmunds. This confirmed Richard's donation of all his holdings to the canons at Donnington Wood and also promised the remaining prebends as they fell vacant. The very eminent witnesses included Imar of Tusculum, the papal legate of Lucius II, Robert de Bethune, the Bishop of Hereford, Rotary de Warwick, the Bishop of Evros, William de Warenne, 3rd Earl of Surrey, and Robert of Ghent, Stephen's Chancellor. Pope Lucius died shortly afterwards, and his successor, Pope Eugene III, a Cistercian, was a friend of Bishop Alexander, the great patron of the Arusians in England, whom he received twice in successive years. He ordered Roger de Clinton, the Bishop of Coventry and Lichfield, to issue a charter confirming Richard's gift to the canons, and Theobald of Bec, the Archbishop of Canterbury, subsequently also issued a confirmatory charter, this time mentioning that the foundation is to be an abbey in the woods at Lilleshall. To ensure the abbey's future, it was vital to secure the approval of Empress Matilda, who was contesting the throne. Richard de Belmay had previous contact with the opposition and was with Matilda at Oxford in 1141, when he witnessed her charter to Ormond Abbey. She issued a confirmation, now definitely to Lilleshall Abbey, in 1148, apparently at Falaise. Her son and heir gave his consent as Duke of Normandy, and again when he became King Henry II. The abbey was seen as a royal foundation, notwithstanding the role of the Belmay brothers, because it replaced St. Alkmund's, a chapel royal. This gave it both advantages and responsibilities. Philip of Belmay property passed via his daughter to the La Zouche family, who occasionally pretended to have advowson. In practice, however, all abbots-elect were presented for approval to the king. The dedication of the abbey was to Mary, as the first charter of Philip de Belmay implied. This is confirmed by the abbey seal used in the 13th century, which is inscribed, Sigillum Ecclesiae Beat Marie de Lilleshall, the seal of the Church of St. Mary of Lilleshall. The abbey's community were Augustinian canons regular or conventual canons, not technically monks. Although the Erusians were at first noted for their austerity of life, they were less enclosed than Benedictine or Cistercian monks. Erusian houses were noted for the high quality of their liturgical observance. A prayer roll of about 1375 confirms that this was so at Lilleshall more than 2 centuries after the foundation. There was a large number of benefactions from lay landowners, and these often came with requests to be buried or prayed for at Lilleshall or for membership of the fraternity of the abbey. Late in the 12th century, for example, John Lestrange, a local baron with holdings further afield, got into a dispute with Ramsey Abbey over the church at Holme-next-the-Sea in Norfolk. In a settlement acceptable to all, he gave the church to Lilleshall Abbey, for the health of his own and his wife's souls. Shortly afterwards he added the church at Shangton in Leicestershire, adding specifically, the body of his wife Amicia when she shall have gone the way of all flesh. Similarly, Robert de Cayley gave the abbey 2/3 of his land at Freesley, in Dordon, Warwickshire, on condition that it accept his body for burial. This suggests that its monastic life quickly built up a reputation for holiness that could be acquired by proximity, and one that clearly persisted into the later Middle Ages. John of Gaunt, 1st Duke of Lancaster, spent 2 days at the abbey, together with his wife Catherine Swynford and a large retinue. He had fallen ill after the 24th Parliament of Richard II's reign was held at Shrewsbury, dissolving on the 31st of January 1398. Gaunt himself, his wife, and his squire, William Chetwynd, were received into the fraternity, and Gaunt made a gift of £20 of gold. Although the fraternity was important in diffusing the influence of the abbey, there is no evidence of lay brothers and sisters being admitted to the abbey community itself. This is unexpected, as the Abbey of Arouez had admitted lay members at least since the time of Abbot Gervase. There were many employees, however. In the mid-15th century, there were over 20 household servants, including 2 porters, a butler, a chamberlain, 2 cooks, a baker, a bell ringer, a cobbler, and washerwomen, as well as a carpenter and a group of apprentices to carry out repairs. There was a tannery on the premises, as well as a brewery. Self-sufficiency was an important feature of Aruasian houses. Aruas itself had a similar but even larger and more differentiated lay labor force. The canons were much employed in managing the abbey's substantial estates, which seem to have been worked mainly by indentured servants and later by wage labor. A fairly high proportion of the abbey's land was kept in domain, cultivated from granges. The Lilleshall estate alone had 4 of these, and there was a ring of further granges in Shropshire and Staffordshire, with 2 outlying at Blackfordby and Grindlow. The grange at Blackfordby seems to have absorbed a good deal of time and labour, with canons often staying there. There was even a chapel on site, with Mass said 3 times a week. This was strictly irregular, as it was considered perilous to the soul for a canon to reside anywhere alone, and there were complaints about it from the Bishop of Lichfield. However, the nature of the abbey's estates meant that canons would often require leave to travel. Both this and the increasingly unfavourable agrarian conditions and labour market of the 14th century meant that direct exploitation of domains was gradually reduced in favour of leasing out land. The abbey was not noted for its intellectual life. However, there was some kind of library, and a copy of a chronicle ascribed to Peter of Ickham has survived from it, with additions made locally. There is also evidence of a canon being licensed to study at university for 10 years from 1400. John Merck, a Lilleshall canon of the late 14th and early 15th centuries, did make a literary mark. He wrote in the local West Midland dialect of Middle English, and at least 2 of his works were widely copied and used. Festial is a collection of homilies for the festivals of the liturgical year as it was celebrated in his time in Shropshire. Instructions for parish priests is in lively vernacular verse, using octosyllabic lines and rhyming couplets throughout. Merck intended to ensure that priests had the resources to give good counsel to their flock. The existence of such works suggests that the canons were actively engaged with the liturgical and pastoral work of their region, if not at the highest scholarly level. The abbey was large and important among Augustinian houses and seems to have reached a zenith under Henry III. However, it was also from this time that it sometimes overstepped or abused its privileges. In 1221, for example, a jury at Shrewsbury complained that a servant of the abbot, Anian from Preston Gubbles, had been caught red-handed with loot from a robbery but had been extracted from gaol so that the abbot could try him in his own court. The jurors had no idea of the outcome of the case. However, relations with royal authority were generally good. In 1242 the king sent the abbot, then Richard of Shrewsbury, a gratuity of 20 marks. 3 years later Henry stayed at the abbey on his way to Chester, and the abbot gave 40 shillings towards the marriage of the infant Princess Margaret. Around the same time, a jury commissioned by John Beesay, Justice in Eyre, decided the abbot need not expeditate his dogs, i.e. remove their claws, as his lands were originally of the royal domain. In 1292 Edward I called Abbot William of Bridgnorth to account for exceeding his privileges in numerous instances. It was alleged he held courts that dealt with pleas of the crown, serious matters reserved to royal courts. Moreover, he was holding fairs, markets, and claiming free warren across his estates, although he had only limited rights to do so. Some of this the abbot sought to justify by reference to extant charters, some he denied, and some he sought to evade by claiming that the villages stipulated in the charges did not exist, apparently an attempt to exploit the loose spelling of the period. The outcome of the case is unknown. Although it was well endowed, the abbey had fallen into serious financial difficulties by the early 14th century. This coincided with the episcopate of Roger Northberg, a very effective administrator and a zealous reformer, who sought out abuses all over. The Diocese of Lichfield, and the incumbency of Abbot John of Chetwynd, a particularly turbulent cleric. Unlike the nearby White Ladies Priory, a community of Augustinian canonesses, where Northberg made a litany of complaints about conduct and discipline, Lilleshall was criticized almost entirely for financial ineptitude and administrative weakness. Northberg found the abbey heavily in debt and criticized the abbot for failing to consult widely enough about expenditure. He highlighted the large number of corrodies, waste of timber on abbey lands, the inefficiency of the brewer, negligence in distributing alms at the gate, and the age and infirmity of the abbot. The tenor of the bishop's complaints is surprising, as Chetwynd was often guilty of much worse than financial ineptitude. It seems that he maintained an armed retinue and he was not afraid to use it. In 1316, Vivian de Staunton robbed a royal official who was carrying a large sum of money to Ireland on behalf of Edward II Chetwynd, together with John Ipstones, a local baron, raised a large force of armed men to prevent Staunton's arrest and then sheltered him from justice, absorbing him into their own retinues. Warrants were issued for the arrest of both of them, but, although Ipstones was apprehended, Chetwynd escaped and went to ground, evading several attempts to bring him to court, and the matter seems to have lapsed. In 1321 he again evaded justice by the simple expedient of not answering the summons, when the king prosecuted him for falsely claiming immunity from tolls and harbour dues in London. Despite his criminal history, when he retired in 1330, Chetwynd was allowed the revenues of 2 manors, Blackford by and Freesley, and of 2 churches, as well as his food, fuel, candles, 2 horses, a capacious lodging at the abbey and hospitality for his guests. Even this was not enough for him. The disgruntled ex-abbot seized the abbey by force and pillaged it. The matter was only resolved when Edward III sent in keepers to restore order. This marked a low point in the reputation of the abbey. The abbey's estates were large but very widely distributed. This made them expensive to work and manage, with stewards to pay at each grange. There were also underlying problems implicit in the abbey's status as a royal foundation. The problem of corrodies was intractable. These gifts of food and clothing were not alms but essentially pensions that could be purchased, and they were regarded as perquisites for royal employees. Any servant of the king who asked would be given or sold a corrodie, entitling them to basic maintenance for life, and many abbey servants were also given corrodies, which continued even after they finished working for the abbey. Abbots gave too many away and sold others too cheaply as favours. There was also a king's clerk to maintain unless a benefice could be found. Retired abbots expected an income and good quality accommodation. John's successor, whom he apparently despised, was Henry of Stoke. He took steps to improve the abbey's finances. In particular, he retained the services of William of Shareshill, a talented lawyer, to maximize the abbey's income from its endowments. Shareshill was very successful and received the lease of Boningale as a reward. However, cattle disease in the 1330s and the first outbreak of the Black Death in 1348 struck hard. The labour shortage brought the community to its knees. Abbot Henry resigned in 1350, and in 1351 Edward III appointed Shareshill and William Bannister as custodians to restore solvency. Richard II and Queen Isabella visited the abbey from 24 to the 26th of January 1398, on his way to the Parliament at Shrewsbury. They were accompanied by 5 dukes, 4 earls, 3 bishops, and a French chamberlain. The cost to the abbey would have been huge, as these potentates would have been followed by an enormous retinue. John of Gaunt's indisposition a few days later brought unexpected relief, as he made a large monetary gift during his stay, as well as putting his influence at the abbey's disposal. Finances probably recovered in the later 14th century, and in the following century the abbey was fairly solvent. Revenues from particular estates were earmarked for specific purposes, generating a straightforward budget. The treasurer then had only limited discretion in spending the remainder. This system kept the abbey out of serious trouble for some decades. However, problems had set in again by 1518, when a canonical visitation by Bishop Geoffrey Blythe found debts of 1,000 marks, with only 600 marks expected revenue. Blythe also criticized the attitude of the prior.
That is at the end of the video. I hope you all enjoyed it. Please don't forget to like, subscribe and comment, and any suggestions for places to go is very helpful. And thank you all for watching, and all have a great day, and see you all soon. And unfortunately there's no drone footage because of the weather. Thank you everyone.